When night falls over the planet and the shadow of the sun moves across successive time zones, satellites capture an image that increasingly resembles less the political map of the world found in atlases and more the nervous system of global civilization. Points of light clustered along continental coastlines pulse like neurons. They transmit impulses in the form of goods, data, and capital. They create the circulatory system of a new era. On this nocturnal map, national borders disappear. Zones of influence marked by colors vanish. Flags and ideologies fade. What remains are ports, container terminals, logistics hubs, places where decisions are made that shape the global economy faster than any parliamentary resolution or central bank communique. This is where real power in the 21st century begins. Not in conference halls, not at diplomatic summits, but in ship traffic control centers, in cargo planning systems, in algorithms governing logistics flows. The world no longer functions as a collection of separate national economies. It has become a single, vast logistical organism. Production, transportation, and consumption have been synchronized almost in real time. Every delayed vessel, every blocked port, every disrupted supply chain triggers a domino effect, from factories in Asia, through warehouses in Europe, to store shelves in North America. In this new balance of power, the port ceases to be merely a place of transshipment. It becomes a strategic node of control. Here, the interests of shipping conglomerates, manufacturers, logistics operators, state regulators, and digital platforms intersect. Here, a web of dependencies is formed in which access to infrastructure becomes a political currency, as valuable as oil was in the 20th century. Old empires built their power around fortresses, military bases, and territorial colonies. Dominance meant physical presence. Today, empires build infrastructure networks. Dominance means the ability to organize flow. A state that controls logistics can influence the growth rate of other countries. It can affect currency stability. It can reshape trade conditions, and it does not need to declare war. This shift in the paradigm of power is one of the most significant transformations of our time, and at the same time, one of the least understood. Societies still measure power in tanks and aircraft. Meanwhile, real competition unfolds at the level of infrastructure. Technical standards, port management systems, logistics platforms, control over trade data. On the night map of the world, it is increasingly clear that China understood this logic earlier than the West. While Europe and the United States focused for decades on maximizing short-term profits, Beijing invested in concrete, steel, and fiber optic cables. It treated ports, railways, and terminals as elements of long-term state strategy, not as ordinary business, but as instruments of power. From this perspective, the New Silk Road is not merely an economic project. It is the architecture of a new world order. Infrastructure replaces diplomacy. Infrastructure credit replaces colonial treaties. Partner states become bound by networks of financial and operational obligations. Their decision-making autonomy begins to shrink. Slowly, quietly, systematically. National borders lose their former significance. Real control shifts toward points of contact, between sea and land, between production and consumption, between the physical world of containers and the digital world of algorithms. When a container leaves a factory in southern China, its journey is no longer anonymous. Supply chain management systems track it in real time. They know what is inside, where it is headed, what impact a delay will have on the market. The port thus becomes a center of data concentration, and data becomes a new form of power. This power operates in silence, in operations centers, in server rooms, in algorithms deciding ship service priority and resource allocation. These decisions appear technical. In reality, they are political. They affect prices, product availability, market stability. The night map of the world also reveals a growing asymmetry between states that design and finance infrastructure and those that merely use it. Developing countries gain ports and railways, but often do not gain control over the technology and management systems. Infrastructure formally belongs to them. Operationally, it functions beyond their influence. In this sense, the port becomes the modern equivalent of the colonial trading post. Except that instead of walls and cannons, it uses cranes, servers, and analytical platforms. Instead of governors, it employs infrastructure managers. The model of foreign presence is more elegant, less visible, but equally effective. Globalization no longer appears neutral. Behind technical infrastructure decisions lie strategic calculations. Whoever controls logistics shapes regional development, redraws trade routes, decides who grows faster, and who remains on the periphery. That is why the night lights of ports are now among the most important indicators of civilizational change. They reveal the shift of the center of gravity of power, from political capitals to infrastructure nodes, to places where, every day, without cameras and ceremonies, decisions are made that will shape the order of the 21st century. The story almost always begins the same way. A country needs a port, needs a railway, needs a power plant, needs a development impulse. Politicians speak of modernization. Media display visualizations. Society hears words, growth, jobs, future. At this moment, the offer from China appears, fast, concrete, without long debates, without moralizing conditions, without demands for political reforms, with ready financing, with its own contractors, with technology included. For many countries, it looks like salvation. In reality, it is the beginning of a dependency relationship, not a simple credit agreement, but a long-term mechanism of influence. Infrastructure credit becomes an instrument of power, quiet, slow, effective. The Chinese model differs from Western financial institutions. There are no multilateral negotiations, no transparent procedures. There are bilateral agreements, often signed beyond public scrutiny, written in legal language that remains opaque to citizens. This is where the real architecture of new colonialism is hidden, not in press conferences, not in investment brochures, but in security clauses, repayment conditions, infrastructure management provisions. Credit does not end with money transfer. It creates systemic obligation. When the economy weakens, when the currency depreciates, when commodity prices fall, the state begins to struggle with repayment. And then the decisive moment arrives. Sri Lanka demonstrated this mechanism in its purest form. The port of Hambantota was meant to symbolize development. It became a symbol of debt. Debt servicing displaced social spending. The national budget began to suffocate. The solution proposed by the creditor was simple. Transfer the port under long-term lease. There was no invasion, no military ultimatum. There was a contract, a signature, control transferred for nearly a century. This is a new form of sovereignty loss, not through territorial occupation, but through financial dependency. The state still exists, the flag still flies, parliament still convenes, but a key part of the economy operates beyond real domestic control. This pattern repeats across regions, in Africa, in Central Asia, in the Balkans. Credit finances the project. The project is executed by companies tied to the creditor state. Equipment comes from the same country, technology as well. A large portion of the money returns to its source even before construction ends. The borrower state remains with debt and infrastructure that requires further investment, further service contracts, further technology, further dependency. A closed loop emerges. Credit funds the project. The project generates maintenance costs. Maintenance costs generate new agreements. Any attempt to break free risks infrastructure paralysis. And port paralysis means economic paralysis. The political dimension is even more subtle. Indebted countries begin to shift diplomatic tone. They avoid criticizing Beijing, fall silent on Taiwan, abstain in UN votes, not because they are ordered to, but because political elites understand the pressure mechanism. Conflict with the main creditor means economic destabilization. Thus emerges a new form of geopolitical influence, slower than sanctions, less spectacular than military pressure, but far more durable. It builds structural dependency, not temporary media crises. This system is reinforced by technology. Ports built under Chinese projects are equipped with Chinese management systems, software, analytical platforms, artificial intelligence solutions, along with concrete digital architecture is imported. In practice, this means a state may own the port on paper, but not control its digital backbone. Trade data, operating systems, traffic management algorithms all remain beyond its real reach. The most disturbing aspect is the time horizon. Infrastructure agreements are signed for decades. Politicians make decisions today. Future generations bear the consequences. Societies repay debts. They function inside dependency systems designed without their participation. In this way, infrastructure credit becomes one of the most powerful tools of contemporary geopolitics. It allows empires to be built without the political costs of open domination, without protests, without images of war on television, while simultaneously creating durable structures of influence. So when another government announces the construction of a port financed by foreign credit, when visualizations of modern terminals appear, when politicians speak about the future, one question should be asked, not who builds it, but who will control flow, data, and operational decisions in 20, 30, and 50 years. Because it is precisely there, in the shadow of financial contracts, that the new map of global power is being drawn. Europe lived for a long time under the belief that geopolitics was the problem of other continents, that wars over influence no longer occur on its territory, that the common market, law, and institutions replaced brutal competition for space. Yet this belief in infrastructure neutrality became one of the continent's greatest weaknesses. Ports, terminals, railways, warehouses. For years, they were treated as ordinary economic assets, technical backbones, something to be sold, privatized, or leased to foreign investors without major political consequences. In reality, they were gateways into the European economy. After the financial crisis, when governments desperately searched for capital and municipalities competed for investment, China arrived with an attractive offer. Port modernization, new terminals, regional development, jobs, and money available quickly, without prolonged negotiations. Piraeus became the symbol of this transformation. Greece was indebted. The port required investment. Costco entered as a rescuer. Today, Piraeus is one of Europe's fastest-growing ports. But it has also become the southern gateway of the new Silk Road, a distribution hub for Chinese goods into the Balkans and southern Europe. Formally, the port is Greek. Operationally, it functions within the Chinese logistics system. This difference does not appear on political maps, but it is visible in trade flow structures. After Piraeus came further investments: Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany. Chinese companies entered European ports not as hostile takeovers, but as investment partners. They acquired shares, took over terminal management, built logistics centers, created a network of presence. This network does not resemble 19th century colonial maps. There is no single flag, no centralized administration. It is dispersed, flexible, modular, and precisely for this reason, highly effective. Europe preserved formal regulatory control. It has law, institutions, oversight authority. At the same time, it began to lose operational control. Decisions about ship traffic management, cargo priority, integration with global logistics networks increasingly take place inside corporate structures aligned with Beijing's strategic interests. This process did not trigger mass protests. There were no street demonstrations, no political crises, because change occurred slowly, technically, administratively, step by step. Only successive crises revealed the scale of the problem: the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, supply chain disruptions. Europe began to realize how dependent its economy had become on infrastructure beyond its full control. This became particularly visible in Central and Eastern Europe. For years, the region was portrayed as the land corridor of the new Silk Road. Poland became a key rail hub. Trains from China terminated here. Goods entered warehouses. From here, they spread across Europe. The war in Ukraine reshaped the map. Routes were redirected. Northern corridors lost importance. Southern corridors through the Balkans, Turkey, and Mediterranean ports strengthened. This automatically increased the role of infrastructure controlled by Chinese entities in Greece and Italy. Europe began to resemble a market that sold its gateways in exchange for short-term investment. Only later did it realize that regaining control would be costly, financially, politically, strategically. The most effective aspect of this infiltration is its non-aggressive character. No tanks, no ultimatums, only investment agreements, economic forums, visualizations of modern terminals, narratives of regional development. For local politicians, it sounds attractive. For regions seeking economic stimulus, it looks like opportunity. For Europe as a whole, it is gradually becoming a structural problem, because a continent that once controlled global maritime trade is beginning to operate inside a system where part of its infrastructure is managed according to external interests. When evening lights of ports in Rotterdam, Hamburg, and Piraeus reflect on the water, everything appears normal. Ships arrive, containers are unloaded, trade continues. But beneath this routine lies a transformation that is only beginning to surface. Europe has not yet lost control, but it has begun to give it away. Quietly, technically, infrastructure by infrastructure. And it is precisely in this silence of container terminals that one of the most important battles for Europe's economic autonomy is unfolding. Without cameras, without headlines, but with long-term consequences. Because the modern port is no longer merely a place where ships dock, not just a transshipment space, not even purely transport infrastructure. It has become a digital node, a hybrid of concrete, steel, fiber optics, and algorithms. Cranes move according to schedules generated by information systems. Trucks enter terminals controlled automatically. Trains are positioned using predictive models. Every movement is recorded. Every container leaves a digital trace. The port has ceased to be a physical trade gateway. It has become a data center. In this new balance of power, real advantage no longer derives solely from the number of berths or water depth. It derives from who controls traffic management systems, who owns access to operational data, who designs algorithms optimizing flow. This is where the new dimension of power is born. In logistics data, in real time, in predictive models, in global flow analytics, modern ports collect information about what moves through the world, in what volumes, at what frequency, to which regions, how demand reacts, where congestion appears, where raw materials begin to run short. These are not ordinary statistics. This is the map of a pulsating economy. Whoever has access to these data sees the future faster than financial markets, can predict shortages, can respond to demand shifts, can adjust trade and production strategies in advance. China's infrastructure strategy accounted for this dimension from the beginning. The port was not meant to be merely a terminal. It was meant to be a digital hub. That is why investments in concrete were accompanied by investments in software. Terminal management systems, analytical platforms, integration with logistics networks. Thus, physical infrastructure was fused with digital control. Every container became a data object, every ship an element of an algorithmic stream, every port a fragment of the global information network. A digital shadow of world trade emerged, a parallel data reality, where cargo movements are recorded, where forecasts are generated, where decisions are made. This shadow is becoming more important than physical movement itself, because economic strategies are increasingly shaped there. The port begins to resemble an economic surveillance center. Cameras, sensors, IoT systems, traffic management platforms, all create an environment of total observability, and when these data are combined with custom systems, payment databases, e-commerce platforms. A comprehensive picture of global trade flows emerges. This is a new form of control, not military, economic and informational. For states that hand port management to foreign operators, this means more than losing control over docks. It means losing control over the informational layer of the economy. Because even if the port formally belongs to the state, even if the flag flies over the terminal, the operating system may be foreign, data may flow elsewhere, algorithms may be designed beyond local oversight. And this is where the foundation of a new type of empire is born, an empire without colonial administrations, without garrisons, without symbols of conquest. Its power rests on technical standards, information platforms, data architecture. The more the world depends on synchronized supply chains, the greater the power of those who control their nodes. The more ports become digital decision centers, the clearer it becomes that 21st century dominance is about managing flow. When autonomous cranes operate at night without human operators, when algorithms steer vessel traffic, when port lights pulse on satellite maps, it is difficult to see that beneath this technological elegance lies a profound transformation of global power. The port ceases to be merely a trade gateway. It becomes the foundation of a digital empire.